Hello. It started out with me perusing these old pictures from a couple regions in the good old US of A. And the majority of these pictures are taken from Detroit, Camden, New Jersey. And it started out really as me just looking at the ruins of these classic, obviously old world buildings and pontificating on why, for such an established and wealthy nation, we exhibit so many signs of degradation in certain areas, so many signs of ruination, or should be a rather prosperous nation. It appears that we have a lot of the hallmarks of a war-torn nation that you might find in Africa currently, and other places of the world, and sort of spotting little remnants of the old world holding on, and how this came to be in such a short period of time, how we could have this period of such glory and attention to detail and element, architecturally and ornamental features, and it looks so out of place in modern day America. Understandably, these pictures are 30 years old, but a lot of these areas have not seen any improvement at all. And just the dichotomy of contrast between what looks to be a very prosperous time and how quickly things can erode if we believe in the modern timeline. Now, I don't really. I think there's much more to the story than they would have us believe. But regardless, this is how a lot of people live. And that is definitely not the first fire they've held on that sink. I mean, this sort of scene is tragic, and it speaks to a different sort of story in such a fast decline, rapid decline, and it's a little bit unbelievable. You can have things like this buried in squalor because we're not a third world country. At least that's not the way we're described. We're not a war-torn country like so many are, and there's such a clear abuse and repurposement of the building. It really doesn't look that different from when you see someone slapping the title bank on this, although a much lower grade. It's the same mismatched style and the same abandonment, 2/3 of the infrastructure, versus what you see in most of Europe. Europe being able to maintain this infrastructure somehow. This led me down a thought pattern, examining the world we live in and trying to figure out what is the truth. And the truth that I have stumbled upon is that, while yes, there is clearly some hidden history here, the timeline does not make sense. And these buildings most likely belong to an earlier area of prosperity, at least on a different timeline than what we're told. The same symbolism that you see everywhere. So why does it look like this? Why does it look like this? How is it that in such a rapid time, a place like the Bronx can look like this? Look like this most of all of our lives, and it is startling to wonder how such a thing could happen in such a brief period of time. And so the answers are multiple. Chances are it wasn't such a brief time. Chances are the timeline has also been somewhat skewed. Some of the construction dates from an earlier period. And a discerning eye will show you that this just looks completely out of place. It looks like a much more older world construction slowly getting enveloped by some new world stuff, some more modern things. With the modern progress, you would expect to see scenes that show improvement. I mean, if you live in a place with a little sconce has to be caged up like this. This says something to the nature of the people and the society you live in, where we are unable to maintain this infrastructure, say, in various places like Europe. Sure, there are restoration projects that sometimes win, and just the amount of old world little buildings holding on. And there's such a sharp, obvious declination between what was and things that are being built around them. It tends to lead to some ruminations. Wow, no matter whatever was only 35 cents, which is probably 25, and they just changed it to 2 to 3 here because that's not a 35-cent piece. And it's led me to a few conclusions, of which I will share with you today, although hesitantly. Clearly, there's something more than meets the eye here. You got things like this simply do not match the things that came later. And these little old world holdovers here, these little spots of ruin that you see everywhere. You didn't think about this, huh? You boys just gonna let them try to hobble off of that plate with those crutches? You got on the mantle here. How cool is that? And the inability to keep this stuff up is very interesting because Europe seems to do a pretty good job of that in most places. They don't look like this. They maintain the look almost like it's a theme park. They don't have this clear, at least in many places, they don't have this clearly declined sort of look. I'm gonna go ahead and say not safe for use. But what is this? I mean, this is so obviously out of place and so obviously abused and misused. You just wonder how we came to this. How is this possible? It's sheer neglect. Now, obviously, there are areas that are very well preserved and very nice, and then you have things like this, this is not any different from the pictures that you see the early 1800s, where the bottom layer has been turned into like a market, and yet the top kind of retains sort of this old world splendor, or at least elements of it. And it doesn't take much imagination to recognize that this is a world built on top of a world. So what the hell's going on in America? Well, let me preface this by saying, despite all this sad scenes, I'm not black-pilled. Not yet, anyway. By black pill, I mean you've almost gone so far that you have no faith, you have no hope, no hopeful optimism at all. And this is just a marker of what is and what is to come as well. And all we can look forward to is more of this, more degradation, more of the history being overgrown until it's gone and there's no sign of it left, only to the very, very trained eye, I suppose, or one that's really looking for it. Now, see, Margaret, this is why we need an HOA. Look what the neighbors did. And it's probably obvious to us, some of us, that this is, there's something clearly amiss here. I'm not black-pilled, and maybe I have a fool's hope, but I still have hope. And sometimes for this hope, I pull from modern mythology, at least mythology. And I know I revert back to this nerdy path often, but I look at stories like presented to us in J.R.R. Tolkien's mythology. And if you're going to say things are divinely inspired, like the Book of Mormon and these other documents people make the case for, well, sometimes I make the case for Tolkien being a divinely inspired mythology. And by that, I mean a story with which we can learn from. And what do you learn from that story? Well, there's a million things you can take from it. But one thing that I see echoed in the world around me that's reinforced through my understanding of this story, amongst many things, one is that heroes are unlikely. They're often unlikely. Now, this may be an unpopular opinion, and I may prove to be absolutely wrong, but I still can't shake the feeling and the belief that what I'm seeing around me is a miracle. Again, I could be entirely 100% wrong, and only time will tell, and I'll take my lumps if they come. But the reason I believe that, the reason I even have any optimism is because, well, you exist. By you, I mean so many of the people I've met or people have expressed their sentiments on this channel and many others, and I exist. And if you could change it all around, if you could make a difference, if you were born into this set of circumstances or had the ability, would you? And I think that you would, and I think that I would. And so because of this, I have to believe that there are others like that. And I have to believe that there's a chance that someone or someones are born into a set of circumstances where they can make a difference and they decide to. So when I look at modern America, what I see here is, yeah, we are a war-torn nation in a different sense. We haven't had bombs dropped here. We haven't had invasions here, but we've had depletion of our wealth and resources and of our youth. We're sending soldiers out to do horrible things, and we have been used and manipulated as a nation to further ends that obviously don't satisfy what our true desires are. We want the truth, and we want prosperity for everyone, and we want to stop waging endless wars around the world. So who's pulling the strings here? And for too long, it seems that there have been a group of insiders that transcend the games that they make us play with our various nations and football teams. They give us a flag and they give us an anthem, and they give us fake borders, and whoever can run their football team the best. See, kids, you're never too old for pillow forts. And to them be the glory and the temporary championship. And this is a game that's been played out for far too long. Now, what I see playing out before me, and again, this is just my own take, my own opinion, my own foolish hope, is that the most unlikely thing has happened. The most unlikely place a hero and heroes are attempting to do what we would do if we were given the circumstances. And this may be controversial, but it seems to me that the current commander-in-chief and his band of disgruntled Americans from various walks of life have tried to take this country back. And not just this country, but the world. And they've tried to wrest control of it from this international group of bankers and corporations and conspirators and giving it back to the people. Because despite the squalor, what you see is people crying out for help and crying out for answers. What you see are people walking around with no motivation, no determination, nothing to work for or live for. The same as you'd find in a war-torn, defeated nation. Casualties, interior degradation, inability to keep up with the infrastructure. Spoiler alert on a 100-year-old story, and despite my love for the film's wonderful works of art, there's a few areas where Peter Jackson got it wrong. There's a few things he left out. And forgive me for spoiling the story for you, but at the very end, Frodo isn't able to defy all the odds and destroy the ring. In the end, he falters and he claims the ring for his own. And yet Gollum, the one consumed by the thought of power, at that moment steals the ring and he's dancing in his victory. He's so elated he falls off the cliff, and he's the reason why the ring is destroyed. Sometimes it takes someone to take it to the end of the line before the creator gives it a little nudge. And I have to believe that those people exist. And I guess my point is the creator, no matter what story you believe in, the Bible, whichever it is, it's unlikely hero as always. It's Peter who denies the he knows Christ. It's David, who does horrible things born out of lust and deceit. Unlikely heroes. Because we're all unlikely heroes. We're all flawed human beings. We're all prone to weakness. And even the ones who intend to do ill can sometimes be used to win the game. And that's what I see happening. I see a push from an American who at some point realized, kids and grandchildren, and running his American business, how wronged he's been and how much wealth has been stolen and plundered for the people, so that places like Europe can live like their Disneyland and have pristine buildings and be protected. And anytime there's anything that needs to be doing to further economic gains, we are used to further this. And we are used to wage wars and to undermine governments that don't want to play the game anymore, and to cause regime change and to keep control of corrupt areas. And I think we as a people are tired of it. And out of all the people, the most unlikely, I think there's some point it dawned on our current elected leader that there's not many chances in lifetime where you have this opportunity, where someone who can weather the storm, hundreds of millions of dollars of bail in cash for trumped up charges, has the squeaky clean legal record to weather the legal storm thrown against him and the investigations and the false accusation. Also has the obstinance to continue, and also the vanity. Because if I'm to believe the critics, our current commander-in-chief, he happens to be the most egotistical and vain person. Well, in a way that works for us, if that's accurate, doesn't it? Because if I was the most vain person and all I cared about was my legacy, what I'd want to do is get to a point where the whole world liked me. And what better way to do that than to bring prosperity back? And so this is what I see happening. What I see happening is the reverse of all the things that went wrong for us. I see the destruction of the central bank system and the destruction of Wall Street on the one hand, the destruction of the Federal Reserve. I see the population being shielded from this, using tariffs to incite to bring back the industrial infrastructure that raised cities like this, and using the lowering of the energy costs to shield the American people from the fallout. I see a Bitcoin reserve being established and a gold standard being established. And I see tongue-in-cheek references to a golden age referring to this. And I see us reverting back, a reverse of what happened the past 100 years, where we get to a point where the Federal Reserve is no longer needed and we produce our own currency again, actually backed by value. And we switch to that and let Americans keep the wealth that they earned and raise the tide and lift all ships. And if ego plays a part into it, so be it. As it seems to me, unlikely heroes are the only kind of heroes. The leaders of the central hub of Western Europe and the Vatican, they're in their death throes and they're lashing out because they understand the game and they understand what's happening. You don't have mercenaries without the money. You don't have endless wars without the money. And when I see one group of people stripping these industries of all their power, stripping them of all their finances, exposing them every step of the way, using patsies, using people that are unlikely, using people that may not even have our best interests in mind, but it doesn't matter because all we have to do is get to the end, and with hope and with a little divine interference, it'll be enough to nudge us over the edge. And I believe this is happening because it can happen. People like us exist. People that truly care exist. And once in a while, enough hope and prayer can give us a second chance. And I think we're the first domino to fall. And once the world sees that we don't have to live that way, there is another path. Injecting a little hope into the world's population can go a very long way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not what's happening. But it seems to me that if that were the case, and both sides are truly evil, they didn't have to go through all this. Just kept us on what was going on. Could have just been decade after decade of this, and we would just be a slow, gradual decline. But something happened. Something changed in the hearts of some men, and some people decided they could make a difference. I think the tide is turning, and I think the most unlikely thing that could possibly happen is happening. I haven't taken the black pill. Not yet. Not while you exist, and not while hope is still alive. As far as I'm concerned, it is very much alive, at least in my heart. Of course, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't even know if what I'm seeing happening is actually happening. And I guess the only message that I have is hope. And maybe it is a fool's hope, but that's all I've got. And if I can pass that on in any way, shape, or form, no matter how small, so that there is a chance and there is a way out and a way to reclaim that glory, well, I think we should take it. And I think we should believe in it. And on that note, I'll see you folks soon.